Welcome to the TheXTPodcast, your ultimate destination for valuable insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories that will transform the way you experience business, governance, and life. Join your host, Ashutosh, as he dives deep into three distinct editions: Customer Experience Edition, where industry leaders discuss CX strategies, product brand, employee experience, digital innovations, and best practices for improving customer engagement, retention, and loyalty.
Have you ever wondered how the future of customer experience is being shaped globally? How is AI, ML, analytics, and digital transformation in general shaping CX? What all is CXPA doing to make CX a key topic in boardroom conversations and to help CX professionals succeed and grow? And what exciting CX innovations can we expect in the future? In this episode of the TheXTPodcast, we are joined by a true leader in the customer experience world, Greg Melia, CEO of the Customer Experience Professionals Association, or CXPA. Greg brings over 20 years of experience in association leadership and passion for advancing the CX profession through certification, publications, and community building. Under Greg's leadership, CXPA has become a key global resource for customer experience professionals worldwide, helping them excel in their roles and connect with a growing, vibrant community. With his unique background in positive storytelling from his time at the IT and productions and his deep understanding of how to foster excellence in CX, Greg has a wealth of insights to share on how the profession is evolving, what CX professionals need to know today, and how CXP is shaping the future of customer experience. We will also explore some amazing real-world case studies, including transformational CX initiatives at Istanbul Grand Airport and the American Medical Association, which Greg will break down for us. So get ready for an insightful, thought-provoking conversation with one of the true champions of customer experience. Let's welcome Greg Melia to the TheXTPodcast. Thank you so much, Greg, for joining us at the TheXTPodcast. Welcome to the show. And I must say, big thank you to you, Greg, because you have been a huge supporter for us. You motivated me to start this in the first place. And thanks to you and thanks to all your introductions, I had some great, amazing guests on the show. So this show has a lot to thank you. I personally thank you for all that you have done for us. And I'm glad that finally you are on the show as well. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I loved your book. It inspired me. And so I'm glad to see you bringing your thought leadership to the podcast space. And I'm glad that we have this time. We took time out of a festival and celebration in your area to record this podcast.
I'm glad that we're finally doing this. Beyond me as a podcaster, me as a customer experience professional as well, Greg, I have a lot to thank you. You do a lot for the community, not just as the CEO of CXPA, but, as someone who's very passionate about CX, that comes out when you talk about CX. CXPA has been supporting customer experience professionals for long. You have seen the growth of it. You have been instrumental in it. And I'm glad that you do so much for the community. How do you see CXPA evolve over the years? What's the vision that you have for the community? And overall, what is it that the customer experience professionals can look forward to from CXPA?
I love that question. If you look back at some of the books on the shelf, you notice that I'm a big Darwin fan. Whenever we talk about evolution, that's important to me. Where did we come from? What is changing now? What's the external environment? And where are we going? So let's flip the calendar back to January of 1994, when Lou Carbone and Steve Henkel first used the term customer experience in an article in Marketing Management. Since that time, there have been a lot of exploration, a lot of discussion about customer experience. In some cases, it's talked about customer experience as a way to spread word of mouth. Well, yes, that's part of it. In some cases, it's talked about customer experience as customer service. Yes, that's part of it. In some cases, it's talked about it as voice of the customer and feedback. Yes, that's part of it. What's really, really cool about Customer Experience Professionals Association, founded in 2011 through the visionary leadership of Bruce Temkin, Gene Bliss, and other early founders, is people realized that we needed to really say, what is the business discipline? How do we stitch together everything from design through voice of the customer, through delivery, through monitoring, through adjusting, through loyalty, so that the customer has a great experience through the first time they learn, through all the way through loyalty. So that's my reflections on sort of like where we are. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are before we talk about the future.
I'm surprised that, it's been 3 decades and customer experience definition is still evolving. You're so right when you refer to Darwin that things continue to evolve, and so has customer experience. As you rightly said, from being focused on customer service and customer support to now being a strategic intervention which cuts through sales and marketing and customer support and help desk and strategy. And I have been in conversations where CX has been discussed in supply chain context, operational context. Employee experience is a big world today. So there's so much that's happening. I feel thanks to the association's efforts as well that we have democratized the information about customer experience. Now, if I work on a framework, I know that there are colleagues and peers across the globe, who are picking up from that, and I'm picking up from frameworks of the others. And there's a great cross-sharing of information and insights and best practices. So I think it's becoming a close-knit community despite being a global association, and there's a healthy cross-sharing of information and learnings. The only challenge I see, as you rightly said, is the positioning of customer experience. Even today, in boardrooms and when we talk to the corporate leaders, the understanding of customer experience isn't truly what it is and what it can do. And I think therefore there's a lot of effort that would have to go into change that. But I'm glad that unlike other buzzwords and trends that emerged, I feel, not just as a CS practitioner and advocate, I feel this is a buzzword to stay. It may evolve in terms of the terminology that's used, but the essence of it, I think, is permanent. I don't see that this is going to change because every business would need it. Ultimately, business is focused on customers, and unless that experience is transformed, it's difficult for businesses to survive. So I'm bullish about this.
I love that. And that picks up on so many of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about. So I joined the CXPA team in 2019. And one of the very first things that we realized was that while the term customer experience was used a lot, everybody was operating off of different definitions. And so one of the first things that we did was to interview a number of different folks from around the globe and to develop a consensus statement, a definition of customer experience and some related areas of customer experience management and a customer experience professional. They're all on the web at whatiscx.com. But that's what allows us to do exactly what you said, which is to say there is a common framework. We're all talking about the same thing, and let's advance that thing further down the road. Let's not argue whether it's CX or XM or HX.
Right.
It's customer experience. How do we take that and how do we move that forward? Now, when we get to that next step, I think it's really important to keep the African proverb in mind. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And to me, that idea of going together is the idea of consensus. Let's do the research so that we can talk about what is true, what is foundationally true for customer experience, and let's get the different voices together in things like the CXPA, CX Book of Knowledge, and agree on the key terminology and the key elements of the framework. Of course, customer experience is going to be applied differently from one bank to another bank, and from a bank to a doctor's office, and from a doctor's office to a satellite company. But underlying all of that is that fundamental thing that you said. You have to think about the business outcome. And how do you have a disciplined approach to creating better outcomes for customers, employees, and the organization's bottom line? That's what customer experience is all.
Amazing. And Greg, you mentioned Darwin. Evolution cannot happen without disruptions and mutations, right? And in that regard, what I also see is the huge transformation that's happening in the digital space, the technologies and the platforms that are coming in. So I was having a very insightful conversation with Lynn Hansecker over an earlier episode, and she mentioned that just 10 years back when they were reviewing the customer insights or survey feedback and so on, they had to go through tons of papers and checklists and documents and manually read it and review it. And now all of this can be done in seconds and possibly also additionally analyzed with AI. Predictions can be worked out and so on. So there's a lot that's available for practitioners today to leverage. As you rightly said, unless there's a framework to apply, all these just become tools and add-ons, and without purpose, none of them will come to help. So is there a approach that's available in the association to consolidate all the frameworks that are happening? Because I remember you talking about this initiative in an earlier conversation. What is it that we are doing as an association to consolidate frameworks and make them available to practitioners world over?
Yeah, I love that. And there's a couple of things. I don't want to leave the conversation without first coming back to this disruptive period of AI, and then also thinking about sort of evolution. Evolution on one side is a good model for us because there is a lot more that happens by random and chance than we recognize. So, for example, prior to the pandemic, a lot of customer experience was, at least in the US, was being driven towards shared space and shared property and shared car rentals. You could go out and get a car on the street to drive around. The pandemic changed that all. The external environment said you need to prioritize individual space, individual ownership, individual service for safety. So the external environment is important, but also we can be intentional now. And part of customer experience is being intentional about the experience that you want to create and then monitoring that and adjusting. And so that's where I think AI really comes in, whether that's on the back end, like Len was talking about, in being able to analyze all the feedback, or it's on the front end, being able to create different versions of marketing messages or headlines or descriptions of how to use a product. Those are all areas to generate different options that you can then monitor and look at the spaces. So on the one side, customer experience is about understanding what you want to create and then using the tools in the discipline to apply. But it's important that that's done with a strategic vision of what your organization chooses to deliver. I'll use the example of airlines for a moment. If we think about some of the leading luxury airlines in the world, they think very carefully about the experience from the time that you are transported to the airport, to the lounge, to the check-in, to the hot towels, the meals, all of that. That is their position. And so they're not going to want AI to generate, you could get there faster if you took a bus, because a bus doesn't fit into their luxury space. On the other hand, there are other airlines that are designing for reduced cost. And in those cases, those same things, a lounge access, maybe even check-in at the airport, cost you more money because they're trying to say, if you follow our design path, that can be your space. So one thing that's important for our listeners to think about is customer experience is about the intentional leadership choice to create a perception that supports your brand's value proposition. So that's one side. Now, I think what you were referring to and where I'm going to go, with this is how we make sure that we have the right tools. Because what we don't want to do is just have a practice of throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. And we're fortunate. There are so many different individuals that are practicing customer experience around the world that we can create benchmarks and data so that we can compare and have consistent observations. Whether that is looking at a data benchmark tool or it's looking at practices for how customers react to different delivery methodologies or different options. I think that is important. So if we were talking about trying to make sure that a light bulb fits into a light bulb base, you'd be looking at mechanical standards. When you're looking at customer experience, you're looking at generally agreed ways of doing something. And by far, the best methodology, a best framework for identifying a person who understands the processes for doing customer experience is CXPA Certified Customer Experience Professional Certification.
Can't agree more, Greg. As a certified professional myself, I definitely agree and endorse that opinion for sure.
So what do we know about Ashutosh? I mean, in addition to being a great podcast host, we know that he has more than 3 years of experience in customer experience, practical experience. Of across all 5 of the different areas that a customer experience professional is expected to know. We know that he has a higher education degree that has prepared him to apply that knowledge. And we know that he is committed to doing ongoing education to keep up with AI and other trends that are developing. That's what you know about every CCXP. And then you should listen to their podcast and read their books so that you can get to know their lens and their philosophy on how to apply it.
In fact, the single biggest contribution of CXPA that if I were to articulate, Greg, has been this common consensus and understanding of the definition of CX, the value of CX in terms of what impact and outcomes that it can drive and it should drive as well. And the third is consolidation of frameworks. As a CCXP, as a member of CXPA, when I log into the platform, the membership portal, I get access to so much of content and collateral and presentations that our colleagues and peers have been creating and sharing with all of us, that it's a phenomenal database. So beyond the certification and validation that we know what you do, there's support in terms of continuing to do better over time, thanks to all the support coming in from peers. And if I may add, Greg, one more point, which is, I feel, far more important to highlight in what you just said is 2 things. One, tying in the customer experience to brand promise, because I have seen the difference when people who have attempted CCXP, they may not have even passed it, but those who have attempted it have gone through the courses, have gone through the content, recommended textbooks and so on, or books and so on. They do have this understanding that customer experience is tying in brand promise to the delivery on the ground. And I have seen that people who don't get exposed to this understanding, they remain in a siloed understanding of customer experience, which is running NPS surveys or CSAT surveys and measuring before and after in terms of percentage point change, which doesn't bring in business outcomes as needed. And I feel that is a huge value addition that CXPA does to the community at large and the professionals globally.
100%. And you mentioned it earlier and you mentioned it again here, but for those that are tuning in, our formal definition of a customer experience professional is a catalyst that works across the organization. And that means that you shouldn't be in a silo. You shouldn't just be concerned about the metric. You should be understanding how the customer experiences the legal, how the customer experiences the financial department, how they experience their interaction with all of the different pieces of the organization, because your job as the CX professional is to help the organization provide a consistent experience, across the space and time. But I also want to talk about what the future holds with CXPA. I have to tell you, this is a brand reveal for you. Just received an email this morning with the first screenshot from the test of an AI tool that we'll be adding to CXPA's website so that you can get all of those resources that we talked about, but applied to the questions that you want to ask the Gen A advisor.
Wow.
So that, I think, is going to be a great space and game changer, 100% based on the CXPA publications. So you can trust that the answers that you're getting are independent consensus answers rather than a particular consulting company or software platform's Google, payment, or rising space in that area. The second, that I think is really cool and interesting about CXPA's future is we have a work group that is currently working on addressing what I think is the root cause of the lack of understanding of customer experience. And that's the fact that most CEOs that are leading multinational organizations and are being asked to support CX programs did not learn about customer experience in their MBA program. They learned about marketing, they learned about sales, they learned about finance, they learned about HR, they learned about shareholders, but they probably didn't learn about customer experience because the term wasn't used even until January of 1994. So we want to figure out how we get the customer experience orientation into MBA curriculum and get it into MBA curriculum with the facts and figures that show it is the sustainable way to establish, maintain, and grow a business.
Amazing. Though, thank you for sharing these wonderful news, both equally important. And to add to your last point, Greg, sales today is way beyond what it used to be earlier. Marketing is way beyond what it used to be earlier. There's so much of specialization and focus within marketing as well. And within digital marketing, when we talk about there's content marketing, there's SEO, there's SEM, there's SMM, and so on and so forth. So what I've seen is the more and more verticalization that happens within a business across the functions, the more and more there's a need for a glue, a catalyst that connects all the verticals together, ensures a consistency in terms of brand promise to delivery on the ground, and ensures a continuity of transformation aligned to what's happening in the market, the technology space, the political space, the economic space, the social space, the consumer behavior space, and so on, and ties all the loose threads into a single continuum of sorts. And CX is the glue which I feel genuinely, addresses that, becomes the catalyst that is needed here. So I see much more need of CX than in the past because of this very reason. And the second external force being the consumer behavior, that the consumers are far more expert at what they need, what they expect. They are far more demanding. There's huge competition. So unless there's a differentiation carved out of your propositions, it's going to be difficult for businesses to win the consumers and make them stay. So again, CX becomes critical. So this is the best time for someone to be a CX professional and then equip themselves with the know-how from the experts in the industry.
100% agree. And, I love the way that you brought the two pieces in. If I had to order the two pieces, I think we do need to put the customer or the consumer perspective first. The
Yes.
customer experience is what we do to try to make sure that maintains to be a positive space. What's also important is that when we put the customer and put the consumer first, we don't put them so far ahead that all of a sudden we change our brand promise or that we change our positioning in the marketplace. Joel Trammel, who spoke at our CX Leaders Advanced conference, talks about this as the triangle of tension. That if we think about the top of the triangle, you have customers, and then at the bottom you have employees and you have shareholders. Well, the goal is to try to get, like my nose, in the center of the triangle. You want to have a solution that is balanced and is good for the customers, good for the employees, and is good for the business. Because if you just go to one point of the triangle, it is likely to be unsustainable. The system's going to break down over time.
Amazing. Greg, to be very frank, I envy your position because you hear so many wonderful insights from so many people day in, day out. It's just fantastic. And the best part is you shared with us all. So thank you. And please continue to do so. We all learn from that. Greg, on that note, since you hear so much from so many professionals and experts all through the day, given the work you do at CXPA for the community, are there any specific highlights that you can remember about successes of customer experience programs? Any initiatives that come out or stand out? Any outcomes that you feel can be talked about to the listeners to understand what is it that the CX can do for businesses?
Yeah, there's two that are on my mind. And I hate to pull just two out, but I'm going to.
Sure.
Going to sort of note to people that take a look at CXPA's Impact Award program this year. I think that we'll have a dozen or so case studies, and we'll also have the Impact Award winners for this year. Each one of them is a case study that shows business impact. But let me talk about two that have really stuck with me over time. One is a program done by Istanbul Grand Airport. And Istanbul Grand Airport is situated geographically in a part of the world where many airlines have a choice of which airport they're going to use to connect the east to the west.
Sure.
And so, real question is how does it differentiate itself as a connective hub? And so what the leadership of Istanbul Grand Airport thought about was, how do we differentiate ourselves as a connecting hub for the passengers of the airlines so that the airlines will connect through us rather than through alternatives?
Nice.
And so what they recognized was that every passenger needs to have an outstanding customer experience. So like other airports, they have a great shopping area. They have great restaurants, they have integration and areas to help you transit the terminals. But what they added that I think is really special and really unique is they added an entire program for travelers with special needs. So some of those are people who have a visual impairment. Some of them are ones that are neurologically divergent and need to have quiet spaces within the airport to be able to transit. And, in thinking about that, the airport realizes most of these individuals are not choosing which airport they go through, but they are choosing which airlines they use and where those airlines connect. So I loved the business strategy of thinking, how do we make this better for the customers on two levels, the consumer level and on the business level, so that we'll be able to have our growth and our success. So that was a really neat, different thinking of how customer experience can unlock growth by serving the entire breadth of an audience rather than just thinking about traditional who spends the most. In some different spaces.
Amazing.
The second are my good friends at the American Medical Association here in the U.S. And what I love about AMA is that their customer experience journey over the past 5 to 7 years has really layered an understanding that the job of an association is to make it easy for their members to take care of their business. So in their case,
right,
they're trying to make it easy for doctors to be able to give care. And doctors can't give care if they're having difficulty logging into the website or accessing materials. And so what they've done at the American Medical Association is actually create this customer experience orientation that goes across the organization. In fact, at their most recent celebration, 25% of all AMA employees were involved in a CX initiative last year to help change and transition. And that's pretty critical when you think about things like logging into the website that really don't belong to any one department, but impacts every customer, every reason they come in. And I think the American Medical Association has something like 2 million logins per month. So that's significant.
Amazing.
So the leadership of Todd Unger and Gloria Gupta and Jeff Phillips at the American Medical Association is just a great case study on, not only how do you impact and improve the organization's value proposition, but how do you do that by really motivating and engaging the entire organization?
How amazing, Greg. And both the examples, in a way, one highlights how CX can be strategic. The business strategy that you called out so effectively is a clear example how CX can add a strategic value and not be considered tactically for support and services only as such. And then the second is, as you rightly said, typically people would directly focus on the end clients or the end customers, but here it was how do we actually operationally deliver the best experience by in fact looking at the doctors and ensuring they get to address the need quickly. So what amazing call outs, Greg. Thank you. I know it must have been difficult for you to pick and choose which impact to highlight because there's just so many. I will definitely be sharing the link of the Impact Award so that everyone can go through the list and learn on it. But Greg, to follow through on this, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I just wanted to say, one of the cool things about the Impact Award program is that we're now accepting case studies year round. So if you're watching this program and you're leading business impact in CX at your organization, I encourage you to submit your proposal so that you can get recognition from your peers, because we want to herald the stories of CX professionals and CX programs that are making a business impact and driving the world forward.
Amazing. Amazing. To follow through on that, Greg, of all the impact stories that you would have read and heard about, is there any common trait that you can think of? What is common to all the successes and all the positive impact that CX has driven? Are there any common points in the leadership, in the way it was done? Anything that you could highlight for us?
I love that word leadership. And I think that it's interesting because oftentimes when I meet someone who doesn't know what customer experience is, I jump to the most recognizable thing that they know. Have you ever gotten a survey after you stayed at a hotel asking you to answer the question on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend? That's a tactic. Leadership is, about creating the strategy that helps us then ask the question, what tactics do we want to use along the way? And so the first thing I would say that is common between exceptional CX versus just CX is that leadership vision that is connected to the organization's value proposition. So that's the number one space. And if you are a CX leader, you need to be asking yourself, is my CX leadership vision connected to our business value proposition? And how do I tell that story? How do I maintain and report on that story? And how do I check in to make sure that that business value proposition has been properly understood and continues to be the one that's relevant to the C-suite? So CX is servant leaders, and the servant leaders that servant leadership is both to protecting the brand value and to delivering the customer experience and customer perspective to make sure that value proposition is delivered and connected. The second is that the research shows that there is a significant difference between organizations that have a cross-functional CX leadership team and one that does not. So if you don't already have it, you need to think about how to establish either a advisory council that works across the organization, or a federated CX model where you have CX team members that are embedded in different spaces. I've even heard one organization that does CX sabbaticals, where they have individuals from other teams come and do a multi-week sabbatical on the CX team so that they can bring back CX thinking into their organizations. But you will not be able to influence across the entire organization if you haven't engaged across the entire organization. So that's another spot that you need to have: the leadership connection, the working across the organization, and then I'll say the last is that you need to have time and persistence. CX is not a quick intervention, and it's not a set it, forget it, one and done strategy. You need to be prepared to monitor what is happening, and you need to be prepared to adjust, and you need to be prepared to celebrate small wins along the way that are leading to that sea change moment that will happen when you've built enough equity in your program and its connection to the value.
Great call outs, Greg. In fact, to the listeners, I would love to highlight one more point, which is if you look at the CX awards that are often being given by organizations and teams or brands, overall research agencies, you can note the difference in the way the impact is being called out. If the award or the impact is being called out in terms of features and experiences that are given, genuinely it's too tactical, it's not deep. Whereas the way, for example, Greg called out the impact, there was so much of depth in terms of the intervention being strategic, the intervention being deep interventions. Greg, on that note, CX is a space where there's so much of cross-exchange and cross-learning possible, because this is truly where one success in a specific industry can be emulated, if not exactly as is, but definitely so many best practices that could be picked up on from one impact to the other. How do we as an association enable this? I know we have a membership portal where we do often share. There is, of course, an impact award that you just mentioned, but beyond these, what is it that the association is doing and plans to do where this peer-to-peer learning is enabled and scaled up and accelerated if the need be, to ensure that we all learn from each other at a much faster pace and emulate success? What is it that we could do to aid that as well as professionals?
I love your comments on the awards programs connected to the learning and the exchange, because we're in that territory of yes and. And what I mean by that is that, you know, when we're looking at a award comparison, let's say, for example, I'll use my favorite pet peeve, which is customer feedback coming out of airport bathrooms. There are many different ways that people could do that, and I think that some of them feel less hygienic than others. You know, when you think about the pros and cons, what's nice is if we had a category of awards, which I haven't seen, for the airport bathroom feedback systems, that comparison helps us to improve that aspect.
Yes.
You know, what we need to keep in mind is that is just one small aspect, and no one is going to choose an airport based on that one point. And so, you know, when we're thinking about elements, we need to be able to be precise and to look at specific things like feedback tools and design tools and the marketing and communication elements. But as you pointed out, we also need to go to the broader space and say, okay, well, what does this mean strategically for my organization and how do I apply that? So there are a couple of spaces on the general areas and the commonalities. One of CXPA's favorite things to do is to get together a group of CX professionals to develop and write together. So whether it is the guide to collaborating with the finance department, or it is developing guidance for considering how to use AI in your organization's CX program. We believe that one of the first things that should happen is that people should exchange what they're actually doing, what they're actually thinking, what they're actually experiencing, because that allows us to more quickly evolve, see what the mutations are, see what the learnings are from that space. The second thing that we really need to do is we really need to foster and create learning environments where people not only hear what those things are, but then have a chance to co-create. So one of the things that I love about our conference, the CX Leaders Advance, is that every session is designed so that you have usually two speakers, sometimes three, sometimes one, at the front of the room that introduce a concept, and they speak about that for 20 to 45 minutes. And then they come down to your tables and work with you and the other participants in the conference to say, how are you going to take this back and apply it in your organization? And people get to ask, sort of that question. Well, I don't think my boss will go for this. Do you think we could do this instead? Or how could I convince my boss? Or how did you convince your boss? And those all become things that help us advance together. So I think that when we think about learning and exchange, we have a vibrant online community. We just have started a new partnership with an online platform called Natter. And what's really cool about Natter is that has that opening introductory comments, and then it matches you and I up for a one-on-one conversation, or everyone else in the meeting up for one-on-one conversations where you can go deep and you can go personal instead of just having general conversations. How many times have you listened to like a webinar and somebody else asks a question and you say, well, wait, I wanted to ask something slightly different, or I wanted to talk a little bit deeper. That's what we want to create, is we want to create that space. And we want, whenever we can, to publish the general case statement and then also give the guidance on how people can take that and apply it to their organization.
Amazing. Looking forward to engage with all of this as well, Greg. In fact, from my end, what I've seen working within the Indian CX community is that we have started documenting the successes we have had. So it's a very simple spreadsheet, for example, which just talks about the sector, industry that the context belongs to, then the use case that was applied, the problem and the solution, and then the metrics and the outcomes. So we are not disclosing brands, we are not disclosing any sensitive or private information. But what this simple spreadsheet does is that when we are engaging with any brand on a topic about CX and someone's asking, so what is it that CX can achieve? We literally have a list of use cases for that particular sector spread across several problem statements with tangible, measurable outcomes being referred. Example being, let's say, if it is insurance and it's a digital marketing use case with the drop-off rate being measurement, and with a CX intervention, $3 million being achieved within a span of 7 months with specific intervention. So it just helps us monetize and measure the impact in advance for someone to invest and budget the necessary investments on CX. And I'm sure that such things, of course, we contribute on CXPA community member portal as well, and which is why more and more people should join the community and be a part of it, so that not only we get to learn from them, but they also get access to so much of asset and information that's available.
And I have to say that, we need to recognize that while we keep talking about CX is broad and differentiated. And so, it is tremendously important that we convene communities that allow conversations across India and the rest of Asia, Middle East, Africa, Europe, United Kingdom, Canada, United States, Brazil. All of these regions are represented within CXPA so that people can connect and talk to the differences in expectations within their region. In some cases, it's very cell phone heavy. In some cases, it's very in-person heavy. So there are differences and nuances that need to be considered. And then CXPA itself is also adapting so that we have both a universal membership, and then we also have special regional memberships that allow people to have all the access and all the benefits, but at a price point that is more relevant to their economy and their space. If you're thinking about CXPA, visit cxpaglobal.org, look at the join, and look for the region that reflects where you are in the world so that you can get involved and, not only benefit from the content that we produce, but benefit by participating on volunteer projects with folks like Ashutosh so that you can share your thought leadership and also benefit from working shoulder to shoulder.
Wonderful. Greg, in fact, speaking on that point, as a CEO of CXPA and focusing on the relevance of CXPA for the time to come, what are the top few initiatives that see as upcoming? I know you shared a few and things that we are already doing, but in terms of the future, what's going to come and what can be expected from CXPA, what are the things that you're most excited about and you're passionate about?
Yeah.
Anything that you could share with us?
Let's go with the broad leadership context. Over the past year, we have conducted research with the CX community. We've heard from over 1,200 individuals. We've had that digested together with a 36-person leadership group that came together to help have a strategy discussion. And they helped us distill 3 key large strategies. And these are all in service of our 2032 goal. The 2032 goal is to ensure the recognition of customer experience as a preferred business discipline by the C-suite and as a desired career choice for individuals. So we want to go from 1994 as a word being introduced to 2032 to having a seat at the table in every C-suite. So I think that's a pretty ambitious goal. So how do we get there?
Absolutely.
3 fundamental things. First and foremost, at the top of the pyramid is that influence. And so we're doing a lot of research right now to better understand how CEOs form their thinking, where they are influenced, what we can do to help raise their awareness of customer experience and their support for customer experience. The second is that we recognize that the core fundamental thing that needs to happen is that CX professionals need to have access to quality training on the professional practice of customer experience. So we will continue to offer the CCXP certification. We'll also be looking at other additional certifications and accreditations and certificates and education and publications that make it easy for people to benefit from the research-based, census-based, independent guidance on how to be a great CX professional. And then fundamentally at the bottom, we're following AMA's playbook. If we want the CX professionals to be successful, we have to make it easier for people to interact with our association. And so right now we're in the process of looking at our tech stack, we're looking at our governance, we're looking at our processes and procedures to try to make sure that everybody is moving in the same direction, which is to create a future where customer experience is known as a term, the practices are established and I won't say standardized because customer experience needs to be personalized, but I will say consistently professional. And then that we hope will allow us to really have that influence on the C-suite.
Amazing. Would that also include the corporates being able to directly engage with CX? Because is there space for the corporates to directly engage with CXP, not just via the individuals, but directly as well?
It could. We are open to partnering with any organization that shares our values and our passion in our space. And in some cases, that might be directly with CXPA. And in some cases, that might be CXPA helping them to connect to the independent consultants or industry partners that can help them be successful. I think that it's really important that we stay focused on the practice of customer experience rather than some organizations where corporate membership programs become nothing more than a badge that is used as sort of greenwashing, I think is the term when it comes to environmentalism. We don't want that. We want organizations that are doing CX the right way, doing the hard work, getting the great results, and making the world a better place for customers, employees, and their organization.
So that's a great distinction you're making, Greg, that you don't want to be, someone who enables badges, but rather someone who enables advocacy and implementation. So that's a clear distinction that you're making, fully aligned on that, Greg. And on that, the last question from my end, Greg, which is about What is it that excites you about the future of customer experience now? I mean, we live in a world which is changing pretty much every day. The political environment, the economic environment, the technological landscape, it's changing literally as we speak. The consumer behavior changes as we speak. So what is it that you feel far more excited about beyond the AI ML analytics? Anything else that excites you in the space of CX?
The biggest thing that excites me about CX and where we are is the people who are involved in the conversations that we're having. If we dialed back the clock, there was a time when the CX conversation was all about one particular survey question. There was a time when it was all about what's your word of mouth score. There was a time when it was all about surprise and delight. And now, what we have is we have a unified, consistent set of voices that says we need to think about customer experience as a business discipline. We need to leverage the master's program that's been established at Michigan State University. We need to leverage the progress that's been made in the software space in the areas. We need to think about showing the return on investment, but the conversations about how to do that are no longer these one-off, should we send a customer a birthday card, or should we give a discount for somebody who does X, Y, or Z? The conversations now are at a much higher and more strategic level. And I think that's going to unlock the next level of performance for customer experience as a field and for customer experience professionals as leaders in their organization.
Can't agree more, Greg. Very excited about this very space of CX, very passionate about it and bullish about it as well. Thank you also for all that you do for the community, Greg. Really appreciate the support. For me personally, you have been supporting me as I wrote the book, as I started the podcast, and you continue to engage with the likes of us, helping us share the information through the community, in the community. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. It was a lovely episode. Thank you for all the insights.
Thank you, Ashutosh. And for anyone who's listening, please join us at cxpaglobal.org or connect with me on LinkedIn. I love hearing different people's perspectives and growing our network together.
Amazing. Thank you, Greg.